Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show for Tuesday, April 27th, 2021. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, and thank you for joining us. Also, we extend an apology for not having a show yesterday. We had some significant technical difficulties, so we are better tracked today. And as always, if you want to call to get a recorded forecast, you can call 1-800-472-0391, or better yet, go online and check out all sorts of information at weather.gov/Alaska. Well, here's a beautiful image from this past weekend on Saturday morning. Rob sent this in. He's near Homer, Alaska, doing a little shrimping and poking around there this weekend when flat as glass there at that morning sunrise. And since then, we've seen more in the way of cloud cover and weather system that'll be moving up into south central areas. But in the meantime, the river breakup monitoring continues. Not too much in the way of significant changes, though. Rivers generally south of the Yukon with the warmer temperatures of the past week and a half. We have seen areas open up, and there have been a few small ice jams that have formed on the Chena and Tanana rivers. One of those noted above the dam project there above Fairbanks, but no major problems at this point, and we will continue to monitor the situation. We always, though, can use your help here with the River Watch. What we need are spotter reports and certainly any pictures or video of note, and you can make your reports or submit these images to nws.ar at aprfc at noaa.gov, or call 1-800-847-1739 and speak with a hydrologist. They'd be happy to hear from you, and certainly that helps us in making various decisions when it comes to forecast products and warnings. Well, at this time, only one hazardous weather thing to report. We've had a fire red flag warning for today, and that's been the result of strong winds, low RH, relative humidity, and that's been south of the Anchorage area. Delta Junction reporting some wind gusts today up around 40 miles an hour with those dry conditions. So for the areas around Delta Junction, Fort Greely, and Tanana Flats, that will remain in effect until 7 p.m. for a little while longer yet this Tuesday evening. Otherwise, on the satellite imagery, we can see in the Gulf of Alaska and the North Pacific some moisture that is being drawn inland there up into the southeast parts of the state. Meanwhile, to the north and west, you'll see a band of clouds west of Kotzebue and Nome, associated with a cold front that is working across far eastern Russia, entering this Bering Strait. And that'll be working its way across northwest and west central Alaska as we head through later tonight and during the day tomorrow. There's also an area of low pressure that is well to the southwest there, the Aleutians, and that is bringing some bands of clouds and some showers that will eventually be lifting up into the Aleutians here as we head through the next couple of days. But more importantly, it's down there in the southeast. They're going to get some better chance of some significant rainfall as we head through midweek, Wednesday and on Thursday. In fact, the Juneau area could receive an inch or two of rainfall, which would be a record for them on Thursday. Otherwise, cooler air will overspread the state, especially the western half, as that cold front works its way eastward and gradually weakens. So here's today's weather maps. Shows an occluded front working its way northward into the Gulf of Alaska with a backdoor cold front there along the interior coastal mountains, and that's where there'll be a chance of snow. There could even be a little bit of light snow overnight, maybe getting down to around Haines and Skagway. Otherwise, the interior, that backdoor cold front has created those gusty winds today through the Yukon Valley, and there comes the cold front there across the northwest. That'll be moving into the Seward Peninsula here toward daybreak. Meanwhile, low pressure there in the North Pacific with the occluded front lifting up into north central or south central areas rather, that will weaken, but then we have another little area of low pressure that'll be heading up toward the southeast peninsula, which will enhance the precipitation that is forecast to be moving in there for midweek Wednesday into Thursday. And by Thursday, the cold front, as it works its way into the interior, will be weakening, but there could be a few light rain and snow showers along that as it works its way a little farther inland, and the snow, light snows continue back through the northwest, where some areas could pick up a 2-day total of maybe 5 inches. Well, a quick check of low temperatures for Wednesday morning. We are looking for lows to get down around freezing there in the northern portion of the southeast peninsula, but still holding up in the lower 40s toward Ketchikan. And then as we go into the interior, readings well below freezing as we get and up toward Glen Allen. And then areas along the coast will generally stay above freezing there in the Kenai, down toward Kodiak Island. High temperatures tomorrow generally in the 40s in the southeast. Still, though, 56 at Talkeetna, could break the lower 50s here in Anchorage, and then heading off toward the south. It looks like King Salmon will still be up around 50 or better degrees here as we go through the day. And then Thursday morning, lows will be a little milder, around 40 to lower 40s there in the southeast. Generally near or above freezing across much of south central areas, and then temperatures Thursday afternoon should manage to get back up into still the lower 50s for the interior valleys, and along the coast readings generally in the 40s. Across the Arctic coast, readings will be between 5 and 10 above for lows. Areas through the Yukon Valley in the teens, and generally 20s as you get toward south, especially south of Fairbanks. And then high temperatures will generally be confined below freezing in the 20s Wednesday afternoon along the Arctic and northwest Arctic coast. And then also as we head southward, still lower 50s in the lower valleys there at Fairbanks. And then Thursday morning lows will be in the single digits and teens across the north slope, whereas lows will generally be a bit below freezing into the 20s elsewhere. And then as we go through Thursday afternoon, we'll still see some temperatures back up to around maybe 53 at Fort Yukon and at Fairbanks. And then heading out through the southwest, Wednesday morning lows will be below freezing in the interior, but generally in the mid and upper 30s along the Aleutian chain in the southwest. And then going through the day on Wednesday, 55 at King Salmon, and readings tapering off into the 40s along the Aleutian chain. And then as we go into Thursday morning, we will see lows in the interior back toward the west there as we get back toward Nome, and as we're looking at lows in the 20s, whereas areas along the southwest peninsula will be above freezing in the mid to upper 30s, trailing off into the mid 30s across the Aleutian chain. And then high temperatures on Thursday afternoon will continue to cool there through the west as the cold front works its way approaching Anchorage and Fairbanks. Temperatures, though, still ahead of that will likely reach the lower to mid 50s on Thursday afternoon. And then a quick check of what we have for the temperature outlook for May 3rd through May 7th is temperatures should average below normal, especially across southwest Alaska. So that should at least slow down the melting of the rivers. And then as we head into the same time period for precipitation, the best chance of above normal precipitation, given it is the drier time of the year, will still be across southwest Alaska, though portions of the southeast could still see a little above normal precipitation. So there you have it for just the overall look at the statewide weather. And again, thank you for watching, and we'll have coming up our short segment followed by marine and aviation weather.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to the aviation segment of the show. Flying weather for Wednesday morning will be influenced by an occluded front that will be weakening as it lifts northward into the northern Gulf of Alaska, and a cold front that is moving into the west and northwest side of the state. We can see areas of IFR extending from Kodiak Island up into the south central coastline, and then also along the northwest and west central coast as that cold front presses inland. You'll see that Wednesday, cold front makes a little inward movement there through the northwest and down into the YK Delta and out over the central Bering. And then also IFR conditions there along the south central coast, as well as the inner waterways of the south half of the southeast peninsula. And as we go into Thursday morning, you'll see progress with a band of IFR conditions moving inland along from the northwest down toward the Alaska range, and especially along and north of the southwest peninsula in through the Bering, and especially there across the eastern portion of the Aleutians. And on Thursday afternoon, still a broad band of IFR conditions from the northwest down into at least the western half of the Alaskan range and southwest peninsula. Also, widespread IFR conditions expected there in the southeast, the inner waterways, and along and south of the eastern half of the Aleutians. So past conditions on Wednesday, Anaktuvuk will be VFR, as will Atikin. And as we drop further south and west, Lake Clark and Merrill will enjoy VFR conditions throughout the day. And rounding areas to the north, Rainy Pass, Windy Pass, and Isabel Pass will remain VFR. Heading east toward Mentasta, VFR conditions as well. Tanita will be seeing VFR conditions, but with some MVFR, especially just south of them. And then Portage will start out Wednesday morning VFR, but become IFR, especially the east entrance as you head out into Prince William Sound as moisture lifts northward along that dissipating occluded front. And there in the northern portion of the southeast peninsula, we are looking for Chilkoot and White to both be MVFR throughout the day on Wednesday. Freezing levels in the southeast are still around and above 6,000 feet, especially the southern half down toward Haida-Gwaii. And in the southwest, we still have some freezing levels around and above 6,000 feet around the YK Delta, extending out over the central Bering. Notice inland areas have seen the freezing levels come down as a result of that intrusion of some colder air that came in behind a backdoor cold front across the eastern interior and northwest Canada. Icing will generally fall between 5,000 and 15,000 feet across the southeast as we head on over toward along and south of the Kenai Peninsula toward Kodiak Island, out over the North Pacific and portions of the Gulf between 5,000 and 12,000 feet, generally above 4,000 feet in the northwest, and then between 7,000 and 17,000 feet along and south of the western half of the Aleutians. Jet stream level winds strongest in the southeast, upwards to 120 knot southwesterly winds. On the backside of the surface cold front aloft with jet stream level, we see winds out of the west and northwest out over the northern Bering of 70 to 80 knots. And then out of the east-southeast there, just south of the western half of the Aleutians, upwards to 70 knots. Coming down to 9,000 feet, we see southwest winds over the far southeast there, upwards of 40 and 50 knots. And then on the backside of the front again up there, in the west, the northern Bering Sea, we'll see winds out of the north at 40 knots, whereas the western and central Aleutians will see winds upwards of 45 to 55 knots out of the east-southeast. And coming down to 3,000 feet, again in the southeast, winds of 35 to near 45 knots, especially as you get down toward British Columbia. Along the south-central coast, some winds could still be out of the east at 35 knots, especially between Kodiak Island and the Kenai. And then on the backside of the low winds out of the north-northeast to 40 knots along the west coast. And as we get out into the far western Bering, the western half of the Aleutians, generally winds out of the east upwards to 45 knots. And a quick check of turbulence. There will be some turbulence there in the southeast below 6,000 feet. Below 4,000 feet in the southwest, especially around Kodiak Island, and then in the western Aleutians below 3,000 feet. And as always, safe flight time and travels for you.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York. and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms, why they occurred. The distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region. The rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not, didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college, wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense in what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses, are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. You know, there are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. One of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, you know, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors. big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
It's time now for the marine weather segment, and looking at today's sea ice, we see things continue to break up, even though we are going to see along the west coast more of a northerly component to the wind following the passage of a cold front that will still allow for a bit of a southward drift of the ice, but at least it's not going to turn drastically cold, and we are in the full swing now of the springtime breakup. The ice out toward the western end of the Aleutians, north of there, will also continue to gradually melt, as we don't expect much movement there across the western portion of the Bering, mainly the east side there, over the next couple of days following the passage of a cold front through the western and northwest portions of the state. Marine forecast for Wednesday, though, we are looking at a northerly flow around 15 knots, inner waterways, including Lynn Canal, Skagway down to Juneau, waves running a few feet, but more of a southeasterly flow at the mouth of Dixon entrance and along the Gulf coast there. Winds out of the southeast around 20 knots, waves generally near 10 feet. And then as we head through Thursday, look for still northerly component to the wind there through Lynn Canal at 20 knots, but southeasterly 20 to 30 knots with waves upwards to 12 feet there at Dixon entrance. And then out over the Gulf, we are looking for winds to be out of the southeast at about 20 to 30 knots there, the southern portion, but west of Yakutak 10 to 15 knots and waves anywhere from about 8 to 10 feet. And then the south central areas for Wednesday, flow will generally be out of the northeast, and Prince William Sound 10 knots, waves a couple of feet. Cook Inlet generally ice-free now, 10 to 15 knot northeasterly winds with waves of 2 to 3 feet. And then off of the Kenai, we are looking for northeast winds upwards to 25 knots, waves 10 feet. And on Thursday, at least look for winds in Prince William Sound easterly 10 knots, waves a couple of feet. Mixed bag of winds around 10 knots, 5-footers there off of Kodiak Island and the Kenai, and in Cook Inlet, southwest winds of 10 knots ahead of that approaching cold front, and waves a few feet. Now looking at the southwest peninsula and Kodiak Island, winds will generally be out of the northeast to north. On the Pacific and Gulf side, upwards to 25 knots, waves around 8 or 9 feet. On the Bering side, 2 to 4 footers. And then as we go into Thursday, winds will be shifting more to the north and northwest. On the Pacific side, 15 to 20 knots, waves 5 to 7 feet. And on the Bering side, anywhere from 3 feet there at Port Huyton down to 7 feet there just north of Cold Bay. And across the Aleutians, winds will be out in the northeast to east, anywhere from 15 to generally 25 knots. On the Bering side, waves running 5 or 6 feet, but higher waves out there once you get past Adak toward Kiska and Shimia, with waves in the mid and upper teens. And then on Thursday, look for easterly flow of 20 knots to 25 knots in the western Aleutians, and waves on the Pacific side generally running around 10 to 11 feet, though a bit less there north of Atka and Nikolsky. And then up through the western areas, over the ice, northerly winds to 25 knots, but St. Paul, St. George, 20 knots with 4 footers. And on Thursday, behind the cold front, again, generally a northerly to northwesterly component to the wind to 20 knots over the ice pack. And out of the north-northeast to 20 knots, 7 footers at St. Paul and St. George. And along the Arctic coast, we are looking at winds to be out of the east at anywhere from 10 to upwards to 25 knots at Katotovic, and then along the west-northwest coast, winds out of the north-northwest upwards to 15 knots over the ice pack. And then on Thursday, the northwest and west coast, including the Seward Peninsula, will be out of the northwest to 20 knots, but still an easterly component to the wind along the Arctic coast. And a quick check of the surface weather map tonight. We have an occluded front that will be weakening as it moves up into the northern Gulf along south central coast and the southeast, and then a cold front moving into the northwest that will produce light snow. And as that feature works its way inland, we'll still see light snow falling on Wednesday up there through the northwest, with a little blowing snow with those north to northwest winds behind the front. Meanwhile, in the southeast, we will see another area of low pressure there just off the southeast coast, and that's going to spread some more substantial rain as we head into Thursday. In fact, Juneau could be looking at record rainfall of 1 inch or 2, especially on Thursday. And that does it for your marine weather. Have a good evening.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.